The steel-gray hull of the USS George H.W. Bush sliced through the choppy waters of the Red Sea, an unspoken warning to any adversary within reach. At nearly 1,100 feet long and carrying over 80 aircraft, the Nimitz-class supercarrier was more than a floating airport. It was a symbol: power, deterrence, reach. And it had just received orders that hinted the calm wouldn't last. Commander Jack Merritt stood on the bridge, hands clasped behind his back, eyes locked on the horizon. At 51, with silver at his temples and a 1,000-yard stare earned from the Balkans to the Gulf, Merritt was not a man prone to nerves. Yet the tension humming through the bridge was undeniable. Every crew member felt it. The world had changed over the last few months. The Houthis, once thought to be a regional nuisance, were becoming more than that. Their drones now flew farther, their missiles hit harder, and their boldness, well, that was something the Pentagon hadn't fully anticipated. "XO, give me a sitrep," Merritt said without turning. Commander Lisa Brower, his executive officer, stepped forward from the radar console. "3 destroyers holding formation. Hawkeye launched 20 minutes ago, conducting overwatch. UAV feeds confirm Houthi activity in Al-Hudaydah. Possible mobile launchers being repositioned along the coast. CENTCOM is watching closely." Merritt nodded. "Anything moving toward us?" "Negative, just a lot of eyes." That was the problem. Too many eyes. The Houthis had learned. They were no longer just launching RPGs from Toyota trucks. They had Iranian radar, satellite guidance, encrypted comms, and now, with tensions flaring after a recent U.S. strike on a suspected weapons convoy in Yemen's interior, retaliation seemed inevitable. The carrier group had been retasked to this sector for deterrence, and as bait. In the flight deck below, the rhythmic thunder of jet catapults echoed faintly through the ship. Lieutenant Commander Mason Reeves, squadron leader of the Vigilantes, wiped sweat from his brow as he watched an FA-18E Super Hornet roar down the runway and lift into the sky. Even after 200 carrier landings, the takeoffs still gave him a thrill. But this mission wasn't a drill. His pilots were flying real combat air patrols now, not just exercises. "Fuel up the standby birds," he told his deck chief. "We might not get a warning next time." Reeves had read the reports. Last week, a Saudi frigate had nearly taken a missile to the bridge. It had been a warning shot from the Houthis, or a message. No one knew which. But on a carrier, ambiguity was the enemy. Below decks, in a cramped intelligence bay lit by flickering monitors, Ensign Tori Hale monitored encrypted intercepts from land-based drones. She was only 24, fresh from the Naval Academy, but her instincts had already proven solid. A few weeks earlier, she'd correctly predicted the location of a concealed Houthi radar truck, earning a commendation. Today, she noticed something strange. "Commander Brower," she radioed calmly, "we're seeing increased chatter in the coastal bands. Houthi encrypted channels just lit up, non-standard traffic. High-frequency bursts, short but fast. Looks like targeting data being shared." Brower's voice crackled back. "Keep eyes on it, Hale. Alert us if you see a pattern." "I already do," Hale replied. "They're triangulating something big." At that same moment, thousands of miles away in Washington, the National Military Command Center buzzed with quiet urgency. Satellites had just caught infrared blooms in Yemen, heat signatures from multiple vehicle engines moving rapidly toward the coast, smuggled missile trucks, drone convoys. No one could say for certain. But they were moving fast, and they were moving toward the water. Back on the carrier, the mood was shifting. There was no official word, but sailors could sense it. The kind of stillness that comes before a storm had settled over the decks. Engineers checked backup generators. Weapons officers ran diagnostics again. Chaplains walked more slowly through the halls. Everyone was preparing, just in case. Merritt took a breath. "Sound general quarters." A siren wailed through the massive ship, followed by the mechanical voice that never failed to spike adrenaline. General quarters, all hands man your battle stations. Down in the ready room, Reeves yanked his flight suit zipper closed. Pilots around him scrambled into gear, helmets clamped, oxygen lines checked. On the screen ahead, a map of the Red Sea displayed blinking markers, unidentified, fast-moving, coming from the direction of Yemen's coast. On radar, they were small, but they were coming in a formation too tight for birds and too fast for fishing vessels. Reeves looked over at his wingman. "You thinking what I'm thinking?" "Yeah," the junior pilot said. "That's not a cargo convoy." In the Combat Information Center, Merritt stared at the same screen. "Estimate time to contact?" 6 minutes, the radar officer replied. "Speed and bearing match past drone strikes." "Flight deck ready?" Merritt asked into his comms. "Affirmative," came the response. Merritt turned to Brower. "If they want to see what a mistake looks like, we're about to show them." As the drones moved closer, missile tubes were uncovered. Interceptors were armed. The world outside the hull had changed in mere minutes. And above it all, the carrier, the floating city with 5,000 souls aboard, braced for impact. But what the Houthis didn't know was that this time, the carrier group wasn't just reacting. They were ready. And they were angry. The first inbound drone was barely the size of a compact car, yet it carried the explosive potential to cripple a billion-dollar warship. Hurtling across the Red Sea's dry heat at over 200 miles per hour, its infrared signature bloomed bright on the radar consoles deep inside the USS George H.W. Bush. "Multiple bogeys confirmed," the radar tech called out. "Looks like a wave of 6. Make that 7. No, 9 hostiles. All inbound, low and fast." Commander Merritt didn't blink. "Launch countermeasures. Prepare CIWS batteries." The Phalanx close-in weapon systems, those unmistakable 6-barreled Gatling guns perched like robotic sentinels on the ship's edge, whirred to life. They tracked targets independently, sensors locked to milliseconds. Around them, the carrier strike group closed in. The USS Lake Champlain and USS Farragut shifted formation, their vertical launch systems humming with readiness. On the flight deck, Lieutenant Commander Reeves sat strapped into the cockpit of his Super Hornet, call sign Vigilante 1. His HUD lit up with a staccato of threat indicators. It wasn't just drones anymore. Signals intelligence confirmed what the analysts had feared. Anti-ship missiles were being readied near Yemen's coast. Iranian Qadr variants, over-the-horizon weapons, precision-guided, and capable of punching through steel. Reeves clicked his mic. "Vigilante team, heads up. We're dancing with death today. Rules of engagement are green. Defensive until ordered otherwise. You see something lock us up, take it out." His wingman replied, "Roger that. This party just turned live." Down in the intelligence bay, Ensign Tori Hale monitored data streams flowing from satellite feeds and AWACS relays. Her fingers danced over the keyboard as she triangulated the possible launch sites. "We've got multiple emitter signals. Coastal ridgelines north of Mocha. I count 3 launchers, probably mobile. Iranian tech. They're targeting with a pulse Doppler pattern, masking between civilian bands." Commander Brower's voice responded cool and steady. "Flag that for the destroyers. Let's neutralize those sites before they get a shot off." But they were too late. "Missile launch detected," a sensor operator yelled. In less than 5 seconds, the entire carrier went into full intercept mode. The Aegis systems on the escort ships tracked the inbound warheads, 2 missiles now, flying low over the sea, programmed to skim beneath radar. A third launched moments later. The enemy wasn't just testing resolve, they were trying to make a statement. The first missile streaked toward the USS Farragut. Within seconds, its vertical launch system responded. An SM-2 missile tore into the sky, intercepted it mid-trajectory, and painted the air with a plume of disintegrated metal. The second missile met the full wrath of the Lake Champlain's close-in defense system, which shredded it with thousands of tungsten rounds. But the third, flying erratically, changed course mid-flight, straight toward the carrier. Merritt stood unflinching. CIWs 3 and 4, acquire and engage. The sound of the phalanx firing was a deafening staccato, like 1,000 metal bees swarming in perfect unison. Tracers sliced across the sky. The missile disintegrated just 200 meters from the carrier's port side. Shrapnel rained down harmlessly into the sea. Cheers echoed through the CIC, but Merritt held up a hand. "We're not done." Indeed, the sky wasn't quiet yet. Reeves and his squadron had just locked onto the swarm of drones that had gotten within visual range. Small, nimble, some of them armed with RPGs or modified explosives. Not a threat to the hull itself, but dangerous to exposed radar systems, aircraft, or vulnerable deck crew. "Fox 3, Reeves muttered, launching a radar-guided missile. 1, 2, then 3 drones vanished in flashes of light. His wingman followed suit, clearing the sky like a hawk chasing crows. The last 2 were shot down by deck-mounted lasers, new tech, deployed specifically for such threats. They were tested today, and they did not disappoint. Still, the encounter had proven something everyone on board already suspected. The Houthis were willing to risk everything for a shot at a headline. A successful hit on a U.S. carrier would be a propaganda dream for them and their sponsors. But they had underestimated the coordination, the discipline, and the sheer firepower of the U.S. Navy ensign Hale, traced back the launch telemetry, matching satellite movement to the heat blooms. "We have firm ID on all 3 mobile launchers," she reported. "Coordinates locked. Permission to initiate strike protocol." Merritt didn't hesitate. "Request confirmation from CENTCOM. If granted, coordinate with the air wing. I want those sites gone before they think about a second volley." Minutes later, Reeves received the go order. His team was rearmed in record time, 2 JDAMs each, precision-guided. The mobile launcher positions were confirmed, and coordinates fed into his targeting system mid-air. As they crossed into Yemeni airspace, the silence on the comms was heavy with focus. "Target 1 in sight," Reeves called. "Copy that. Rolling in." At 12,000 feet, he released his payload. 2 bombs, streaking downward with unrelenting precision. They struck within a meter of their target, obliterating the launcher, its crew, and its command van in a cloud of fire and dust. The other teams followed suit. Within 5 minutes, the entire strike network that had dared to challenge a Nimitz-class aircraft carrier was gone, reduced to smoldering craters. Back aboard the carrier, the crew watched satellite feed of the aftermath. There were no cheers this time, just quiet respect. The danger had been real, too real. Merritt stepped back from the operations screen and looked around at his officers. They took a shot, and now they've learned. You don't poke the bear. Even as calm returned to the sea, everyone aboard knew this was just the beginning. The rules had changed. The Houthis had crossed a line, and the next move belonged to Washington. The moon hung low over the Red Sea, casting a silver trail across the rippling water as if nature itself were tracing the path of the battle just fought. The night was deceptively calm aboard the USS George H.W. Bush, but inside the Combat Information Center, the air still carried a tension that couldn't be washed away by victory alone. Victory had a cost, and it rarely came without consequence. Commander Merritt stood in front of the digital wall, reviewing the latest intelligence. The 3 Houthi launch sites were confirmed destroyed. Still, the attack's brazenness gnawed at him. This wasn't some rogue operation. It was calculated, supplied, backed. Intel confirms heat signatures consistent with Iranian IRGC trainers in the vicinity of the launch zones, Ensign Tori Hale reported. Her voice was calm, but her eyes reflected the weight of what she had just uncovered. We also picked up encrypted comms traffic routed through southern Sana'a just hours before the strike. Signals analysis confirms they were using Iranian military frequencies. Merritt frowned, rubbing his chin. They weren't just testing our defenses, they were testing our response time. The implication hung in the room. This wasn't a one-off ambush. It was reconnaissance by fire. The Houthis, emboldened by foreign support, were feeling out how close they could get to provoking a direct retaliation without triggering escalation. But the line had been crossed, and now the choice belonged to Washington. Strike back harder, or step back and risk being seen as weak. In the ready room, Lieutenant Commander Reeves debriefed his squadron. Most of them still wore the grime and sweat of the battle. There were no high fives, no adrenaline-fueled cheers. Only the sobering realization that they had come within seconds of becoming headlines in someone else's propaganda campaign. "Let's not forget why we're here," Reeves told them, his tone subdued but resolute. "That carrier isn't just a war machine. It's a symbol. We don't fly just for firepower. We fly to keep threats from getting close enough to make that symbol bleed." Across the sea, a U.S. Navy P-8 Poseidon reconnaissance aircraft maintained overwatch, scanning for residual threats. It picked up movement, small vessels darting out from the Yemeni coast, likely fishing boats, but some were heading too close to the fleet's outer perimeter. Merritt ordered a pair of MH-60 Seahawk helicopters to intercept and investigate. Within minutes, one of the choppers spotted a vessel equipped with a makeshift antenna array. Too advanced for a fishing operation. A boarding party from the USS Farragut moved in fast. What they found turned the tide of the investigation. Beneath tarps and barrels of bait, the team uncovered encrypted satellite radios, targeting maps of the carrier group's last known positions and most damning. A data drive loaded with surveillance files, dates, times, frequencies, a detailed playbook of how to strike again. Back on the carrier, the evidence was relayed directly to CENTCOM. The narrative was forming fast. Iran had not only supplied weapons, they had provided real-time intelligence support. This wasn't just proxy warfare. It was coordination, cooperation, and intent. The next morning, as the sun broke over the water, Zrania, the fleet remained on high alert. Despite the threat being neutralized, the strike group knew this was far from over. A carrier assault wasn't just an attack on steel and sailors, it was an attack on deterrence. If it went unanswered, others would follow. North Korea, the IRGC, militia groups watching from afar. Reeves sat alone on the wing of his Super Hornet, helmet in hand. Below him, the ocean churned with quiet menace. He wasn't a man prone to speeches or sentiment, but the events of the last 24 hours had stirred something. They had flown into fire, been locked up by live missiles, watched death streak toward them at Mach speeds, and still, they'd prevailed. Not because they were lucky, but because they were ready. Because every drill, every moment of training, every lesson learned from those who'd come before, they all mattered now. On the bridge, Commander Merritt received a final communique from CENTCOM. Authorization was granted. The message was terse and clear. Deterrence must be reestablished, immediately and visibly. Before the crew even had time to digest it, flight operations were underway again. This time, it wasn't a defensive posture. It was a clear signal. A formation of FA-18 Super Hornets thundered off the deck, their afterburners igniting against the morning sky. Their mission wasn't classified, but it didn't need to be. Satellite uplinks were live. Everyone who needed to see the retaliation would see it. The strike wasn't about destruction. It was about presence, power, precision, and perhaps most importantly, reminder. When the Hornets returned, silence gripped the deck once again. The message had been delivered. The Houthis and those behind them now understood. You don't attack a U.S. carrier without consequence. You don't gamble with global security for headlines, and you certainly don't fire at the heart of American naval power and walk away untouched. As darkness returned to the sea, the fleet maintained its course, steady, ready, unshaken. Would you like help crafting the YouTube description and hashtags next?